Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, which has been hosted by the CIWEM South Western branch. And we've got two great speakers, Matt Wheeldon and Sarah Bunney, who are going to talk about rainwater management, particularly for reducing flooding and storm overflow discharges. Obviously, with climate change intensifying and water scarcity becoming a big issue, I think this is going to be a very hot topic, and I think Matt and Sarah are going to cover the why and how. So I think Andrew's going to give a bit of an overview about some CIWEM notices and housekeeping.
Thank you very much. Yes, I can do the general housekeeping. Please note that this webinar event will be recorded. You should have a little OK button to press up in the corner up there. Essentially, we only put recordings of the events up on the website. Takes 2 or 3 months or so, maybe less, depending on how they do it in batches. But ultimately, it gives access to a vast array of past digital series. Please find the link there. If you have any technical issues during the Zoom call, let us know. You've got access to the Q&A and also the chat. So please let us know, and we will do everything we can to help you out. We'll take your questions at the end of the presentation. So there are 2 presentations, but we'll take the questions at the end. But please populate the Q&A, and we will try and answer them as we go. If there are any that are able to be answered, we'll let you know. There's 1 hour CPD attributable to this webinar, but we don't provide certificates, but please obviously write that in your CPD log as you go. All about CIWEM. If you're not a member of CIWEM, I just pose the question, why not? You should be. CIWEM, certainly for me personally and my professional career, I've been a member of CIWEM for probably the best part of 38 years now. And they've done a lot for me, and hopefully I've done a lot for them. You can see CIWEM through all of those links. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we've got extensive advice about membership at all different levels. There's a lot of learning and development, further CPDs, but where a lot of CIWEM's good work is in the policy and the advice to government, advice for various different departments, and you'll find all of that knowledge on those links that you have in front of us. There are various journals and magazines that you should be aware of, and again, those links are there. CIWEM has members throughout the globe, and not only New Zealand, coming all the way back through Hong Kong, but 89 different nations are covered. We're a very broad church, but if you've got anything to say, anything to give, then please do reach out and get in touch. We are a UK Royal Chartered Institution charity, which means you can get professionally accredited, and I wholeheartedly recommend CIWEM to those who are attending today. Any questions, please get in touch either with us at the Southwest region or nationally through the website links that we've already given you. Thank you very much.
Right, over to Matt Wheeldon from Wessex Water.
Thank you very much, Andrew and Anthony, and good afternoon, everyone. I work for Wessex Water. I've worked in the water sector for 30 years. I'm a civil engineer. I'm passionate about the environment. I love wild swimming. And what I'm going to talk to you over the next few minutes is quite a simple message. It's not rocket science. There's not a huge amount of technology. I'm not going to be mentioning AI. I'm going to be talking about a story of common sense, or rather, quite often, a lack of it. I hope you enjoy the ride. Gosh, I mean, the recent heat wave has really reinforced what a lot of us have been saying for quite some time. And sometimes it takes extreme events for people just to wake up and smell the roses. Our summers are definitely getting warmer. When you look at the trends over the past 50 years, the UK mean temperature in the summer, that's June, July, August, 3 months of the summer, has increased by 1.4 degrees in 50 years. So 50 years ago, 1976, of course, a very famous drought for those of you who remembered that. Many of you won't remember that, but in those 50 years, the climate has changed remarkably. And if you project that dashed line forward another 50 years, boy, we're going to be in a very different place. And of course, that warmer summer brings wilder weather. So whilst the rainfall volumes don't actually increase, the weather becomes a lot more wilder. And last week, a week ago, last Monday, this was the weather in Bath, where I live. And that middle graph shows the rainfall intensity. For 10 minutes, we experienced a rate of 250 millimeters per hour. We don't even have the ability to give that a return period, because the flood estimating handbook kind of loses a bit of definition when you get below events that last less than an hour. We're entering a new world, a world of tropical weather. And today is the International Day of the Tropics. So a very opportune day to be speaking on this, because our weather is moving from one of just drizzle to one of drought and deluge. And the picture on the right is just down the road from me, where there was certainly a massive deluge. Of course, it's not just our summers that are changing, our winters are getting warmer as well. And with warmer winters brings wetter winters. And then add in spring and autumn, and overall what we're seeing is a very rapid, well, from a climate change perspective, change in temperatures and rainfall. So over the past 50 years, rainfall over the year has increased on average in the UK by 150 mil a year. That is significant. So let's get back to our topic, because of course, flooding and storm overflows are all about having too much rain. And water companies are investing billions to try and address this on their sewage networks. And there are kind of 4 options open to them. 1A and 1B in front of you is called separation. That's where you take the rain out. 2 is opportunities to treat the overflows. 3 is where you increase the treatment capacity at the treatment works. And 4 is where we deal with the problem in the pathway. We attenuate the rain, or we just build bigger pipes. I'm just going to go through these and just kind of talk about them relative to one another. And you'll see where I'm going to end up in kind of 1A being the best solution. The traditional solution for storm overflows has always been storage tanks. Very high carbon embodied in the concrete, and then a massive carbon footprint for then emptying them and then treating them. People forget that this contaminated rain all needs treating, and when we treat, we use energy and we use chemicals. And a lot of those chemicals are flow related. So if you're going to treat a higher flow rate or flow total volume, you're going to use more chemicals. And the carbon footprint of those chemicals is pretty significant. Just to give you some perspective on this, in a dryish year, we treat more than 50% more liquid than we provide our customers. So that means that 50% of the total flow that we treat is rainwater, and in a wet year, that number goes up to 80%. So that 50 to 80% extra liquid treated because of combined sewer systems is going to go up even more if we deliver these kind of solutions. The energy is amazingly high. Option 3 is you increase your treatment capacity at the sewage works, at the water recycling centres. Here is £150 million being spent at our largest site here in the West Country. This is at Avonmouth. We're increasing the flow to full treatment, that's the maximum flow rate, to 5.7 tonnes a second. Now, when you think how much sewage is actually arriving at this site, it is 1.5 tonnes a second, which means that we are treating 4.2 tonnes a second of rain. How daft is that? that is a traditional solution. People realise that a lot of these overflows are very low in concentration of contaminants and pollutants because of the dilution factor of rain. And so recognising that the level of treatment doesn't need to be significant, nature-based solutions, especially for overflows that are driven by groundwater, have become a very viable option, especially as DEFRA and the EA are now accepting these as trials. We've got 31 of these going on here at Wessex Water. The influent is incredibly weak, and the effluent is even better treated through these reed beds and nature-based solutions. So great, but an end-of-pipe solution, not really tackling the problem at source. Let's get onto separation solutions and managing rain closer to where it lands. Developers have built communal SUDs for quite some time now, but they're not as great as everyone shouts about because quite often there is a lack of management and maintenance. Quite often that's passed on to a management company. The customers in the properties are paying not only to have their rain taken away in the pipes by the water company, but then paying another cost to the management company to maintain the SUDs. And when you look at that very same SUD on a map, what you'll see is that where we're dealing with the rain is some distance away from those new properties that have been built. And that's not always a great idea, because if nature wouldn't have done that naturally, we're interfering with nature and we're moving the rain horizontally and gathering it together with its mates. And whenever you gather rain together with its friends, it generally causes problems. We should be really trying to keep raindrops lonely. They're far easier to manage. And if you keep them very lonely at property level, what it does, it suddenly opens up another door opportunity, and that is seeing rain as a resource. And the simple old, humble old, cheap old water butt is a great way for flattening the peaks of water demand. But then a simple rain garden or soak away is a great way of getting rid of that rain back to where nature would have put it in the first place. So looking at all those options together, and property level SUDs stand above them all from an impact on customers' bills, carbon footprint, biodiversity, and also water efficiency. Why aren't we doing them en masse? We're not really focused on where the problem is. You see, the problem is in our homes. The problem is that we're filling our toilets with drinking water, and then we're adding the rain off our roofs into the same flush from those toilets. Traditionally, water companies, on whom the burden to tackle these problems has always been put, fixes them with centralised solutions. In the current state of play, lots of new strategic resource options focused around big reservoirs. And on the storm overflow side, big new storage tanks. And all that means we're going to do is we're going to store, treat, and pump more drinking water to all these new homes that are being built, so that we can fill the toilet systems and water the gardens with drinking water. Then we're going to continue to allow rain to be added to the sewage, where we're going to store it, pump it, and then treat it all. These solutions are not great long-term, sustainable, climate-resilient, low-carbon solutions. And so we're stuck in this vicious circle with a rapidly changing climate that I've talked about. We're building 1.5 million homes, which will add a lot more impermeable area, and people are constantly paving over their driveways so they can park their car near their home, so they can charge their electric vehicles. Water companies are trying to solve the problems with centralized solutions to address both water scarcity and storm overflows and flooding, and that leads to higher carbon footprint solutions, which then creates a rapidly changing climate. Oh dear, what do we need to do? Well, as I said right at the start, this is not rocket science. Janet and John were famous characters in the 1940s and 50s in children's books, and they were renowned for speaking very simple language. And that's really how we got to start. We've got to start by changing the narrative. You guys, because you are connected with CIWEM or you're linked to CIWEM, will understand words like integrated and systems thinking and holistic and catchments. But sadly, most people don't understand those. So we really need to simplify the language and just talk about managing rain better where it lands. This is a message that is simple, but it is a message that is getting through. We've also got to follow source control principles. Rather than just thinking about rain as a problem to be got rid of, let's think of it first and foremost as a resource that we capture and we use where possible. We're not reusing it, we're using it. It hasn't been used before. So this is all about rainwater use. And secondly, we should be trying to return it back to the environment as close as possible to where it landed. And if you want to simplify those two statements into 4 words, there they are: harness nature, mimic nature. Well, we do need a holistic strategy to deal with rainwater, and it's something that we don't really have in this nation. There's nowhere where people considering changes to legislation, regulation, building economic incentives to help people do it, improving education and improving technical guidance. There's no one who brings it all together. And that's something that I've been trying to do over the past few years, just to show both politicians, civil servants, regulators, everyone who's involved in this space, including property owners, what we need to do to manage rain better where it lands. My view is you target easy things. And when it comes to these 2 principles on the left-hand side, then new build provides the greatest opportunities for capturing rain locally and using it. When we build new homes, putting in rainwater harvesting to flush toilets and water gardens is the greatest opportunity that we have. Retrofitting that kind of stuff is incredibly expensive, but it's still possible to do, especially outside, where you could put in a water butt when you're taking the rain off the combined sewer. But the biggest benefits will be to the drainage side and getting that rain back into gardens and away from network capacity constraints and storm overflows. So really, those are the 2 main areas which will provide the greatest opportunities to help us move from our current infrastructure, which is all about taking drinking water from miles away and then using it for non-drinking purposes, and then returning it back in a centralized system for someone else to look after, instead of let's look after it ourselves. If you want a good example of legislation that covers that, you just need to read Germany's federal water law, where it puts the burden for both conserving water and not accelerating runoff on every person. Not on water companies, but on every property owner. They have duties to manage the rain where it lands. So there's a lot happening in this space, which is very, very exciting for me and for everyone who's involved in this. DEFRA certainly get it. In the new vision for water, the water white paper that came out at the start of the year, they are talking about rainwater management. They're also recognizing that these approaches are more sustainable and deliver wider benefits, as I've just explained, reducing flood risk, supporting biodiversity, sorting storm overflows too. They also recognise that there's not one single thing that's going to help us do that. We need changes to legislation, changes to regulation, and changes to funding streams. What they do here is they call them pre-pipe solutions, which doesn't really make much sense. I always tell them to use the word source control because that's easier to understand. The Water Minister gets it. Brilliant. It's great to see Emma Hardy here talking about managing rain where it lands and talking about rainwater management. So that's brilliant. The new national SUD standards from DEFRA get it. Look, they've changed the SUD standards into a rainwater management standard because the first thing you do with considering where rain goes is you consider how to use it. That is a massive change in the hierarchy of what you do with rain. You collect it for non-potable use. Spot on, well done DEFRA, and then you return it to the environment as close as possible to where it first landed. And hopefully you never get to 0.5 at the bottom. Now the problem here, of course, is that the new national SUD standards are non-statutory guidance, and we've got to put them onto a stronger footing if we're going to make any difference to this. There's good work going on at the moment nationally, trying to answer this, which is the $6 million question. What is the evidence that managing rain better where it lands is better economically for society and the environment than centralised solutions. And if you're a CIWEM member, you'll be delighted to know that CIWEM are part of the team who are helping to answer this question that UCWER have posed, that DEFRA are supporting, HR Wallingford are leading, and CIWEM are supporting. So that's a very exciting project that is ongoing at the moment. Other countries are well ahead of us on this topic, either because their climate has rapidly changed way before ours, or because their water infrastructure was never as good as ours, and they are looking at how they harness rain and manage rain. And in a few months' time, the world of water comes to Glasgow, where I will be leading a forum on rainwater management. And I'm delighted to say I've got speakers coming from Australia, South Korea, Germany, Belgium, and the USA, where they're going to be telling us about how they progressed in their policy journey to being far more progressive than we are. There's another UCWER project that's going off the back of this, which is also looking at how other nations approach this topic, and also trying to measure the benefits they are seeing from this. Well, we're leading on technical guidance, I reckon, as we convert the Syria SUDS manual, which has been the Bible of sustainable drainage for the past 10 years, but not updated for 10 years, into the rainwater management platform. This is going to be a free-to-use design technical guidance platform for everyone, from property owners through to water companies and highways authorities, on how to manage rain better where it lands. And it's going to not only look at drainage, but also water reuse, or rainwater use where possible. This is an Ofwat Innovation funded project that is being led by Syria, Stantec, HR Wallingford, and every single water company via UCWER has got behind this project. So it is very, very exciting. And we're going to see that rolled out next year. Let me finish with 3 takeaways for you to remember. These are changing the narrative, manage rain better where it lands, harness nature, mimic nature, and if all else fails, source control, source control, source control. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Matt. That was very thought-provoking, and lots of exciting things in the pipeline, excuse the pun. We've had a few questions which I think are quite sort of relevant to your presentation. So we were going to have a bit of a discussion after the 2 presentations, but I think these questions are probably quite relevant to your presentation. So the first one that came in was, is there any future designs to use rainwater for the toilet rather than clean water?
Yes, the designs exist. They're all in building regulations, document document G, but they are optional. The reason that developers don't do it is it costs them more. It costs them more, but then the beneficiary is the customer and then the environment. The standards exist. The Drinking Water Inspectorate have recently published guidance on this. Other countries already do it. So there's nothing really stopping it apart from the economics and the lack of mandatory nature. How do you get new developers to do it? Well, either you tell them to do it, which means all developers have an increased baseline. That's not going to work in today's climate, because anything that puts base costs onto new development, they squeal about and they kind of wear the trousers in the relationship with the 1.5 million homes being built. Government is unlikely to do that. But economic incentives is the other way. And what we've got to do is improve the economic incentives to really encourage developers to harvest the rain at property level, or for more high dense development to look at more communal systems. There's nothing stopping it. The design point of view, it's really all about the legislation and the economic incentives that are the blockers at the moment.
And there's a question from Claire. This is very focused on housing, but what about farming and agriculture?
It's exactly the same principles, exactly the same. So there's nothing different about the principles of source control and managing rain better where it lands. Clearly, what I'm talking about here is dealing with storm overflows and flooding from sewers. But the same principles exist. We do have the Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Strategy. So that is the only national strategy that mentions rainwater management. And that's very much focused on rivers and the rural environment. And that is being updated. So the EA are updating that. And the people in the EA updating that are very much on board with the same messaging. So we're going to see a nicely improved, reworded Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Strategy coming out from the EA fairly soon, which will cover more to do with rural land management.
And how is public awareness and participation in the UK when it comes to property level source control measures? Do you have good examples in the past? And that's a question from Yi.
It's not good. It's not good. And one of the reasons is because the message that has landed for year after year after year is that the people responsible for sorting out flooding and storm overflows is the water companies. There hasn't been a message that we're all responsible for the rain that lands on us. So water companies are in a very difficult position. The fact that we are privatized means it's very easy for government to point the finger at us to solve the problem. Clearly, if you were a part of a nationalized organization, they'd be pointing at themselves. And what we haven't yet seen is that messaging, that consistent messaging that source control solutions, property level solutions, harnessing nature, mimicking nature at property level is the long-term sustainable way forwards. And so that makes it difficult. And it also makes it difficult that we don't have powers to go and tackle the problem at source, which is why we're building all these terrible big concrete storm tanks. So there's a long way to go in public education. And that's why we need people like yourselves who are listening to take this narrative back and start talking, speaking truths about managing rain better where it lands, about harnessing nature, about mimicking nature. The more of us who talk about this in the same simple way, the more of us who write to our MPs in the same simple language, the more we're going to change legislation and regulation and economic incentives to get those right long-term solutions.
And if using property level SUDs reduces the need to utilise drinking water for things such as toilets and gardens, would it be realistic to expect a fall in consumer bills?
You will, exactly, you will, because most people are metered, or now smart metered. If you use less water, you pay less for the service. Toilets and garden watering account for 25 to 30% of your bill. If you're not using drinking water and you're not then being charged for assuming that drinking water is coming back to the sewer, which is what the current assumption is, and then also you're not paying a rainwater charge for taking a rain off-site, then your bills are going to drop by 25 to 30% compared to your neighbours whose aren't. So the problem we have, of course, at the moment is that water is still very cheap. Now, that is gradually changing. And so those fiscal levers will start getting more assertive and people will start seeing much greater savings from managing the rain where it lands. Just an interesting stat, well, it's not a stat, but it's a fact. In Germany, where you're charged per square metre of impermeable area connected to an off-site pipe, be it surface water sewer or combined sewer, what they've seen is they charge people on euros per metre squared per year, and they've seen a huge uptake in rainwater harvesting as a result of charging people for taking the rain off-site. Because people are suddenly connecting the two and going, oh my goodness me, it's the same thing. I can save money by using the rain. I can save money by keeping the rain. What's there not to like from customer perspective?
Freddie's asked the question, can we realistically achieve water collection and separation at the household level when many homeowners seem largely unaware of the issues? They already complain about high water bills. How likely are they to be willing to maintain these systems? Moreover, these are often the same people who dispose of sanitary products and wet wipes in toilets. Do you think a truly collaborative approach can be achieved under these conditions?
Gosh, well, I mean, you're spot on all those things. I don't disagree with any of those, which is why that strategy had 5 pillars to it. It isn't a simple thing as, okay, we'll come and pay for it to build a water rain garden in your property. That's not going to cut it. They've got to see so education plays a part, because they've got to understand how they fit into the bigger system. So it's also going to require legislation to enable water companies to do it. Don't forget, we do this in energy quite a lot. You pay a big standing charge in your gas and electricity bill to enable others to draw down from that fund in order to put solar panels on their roof. So we have valued it when photons land on our roofs, but not when raindrops land on our roofs. We will see that change gradually. And what I'm trying to do is accelerate that change of understanding that natural resources that land on your roof is a good thing. And then once you've used it, try and get rid of it locally. And we will see this change. We are seeing this change. It's a big ship to turn direction. But I'm very confident that within the next 10 years, what I'm talking about will be very, very normal.
I think I'll just ask one more, and then we'll hopefully have time in the discussion afterwards, because I want to make sure Sarah's got enough time to. So Furrows asked a question. I was surprised by the level of water treatment and the chemicals required for rainwater. What are the cost benefits of treating harvested rainwater compared with treating wastewater effluent?
Okay, so as soon as you contaminate rain with sewage, you're basically treating sewage, and so all those standards apply. So phosphorus standards, nitrogen standards, all those things apply, and therefore you're causing a problem that you then have to unwind. If you've just got rainwater landing on your roof, then the level of treatment required is much lower, because all you're doing is using it for flushing your toilet or watering your garden. You don't really need any treatment for washing your garden. Some people would argue you might need to do something for flushing your toilet if you don't like the fact that the rain isn't completely clear like your drinking water is. And certainly when you get first flush off roof, you might need to have a system that deals with the first flush. And also you've got to maintain the system. So you've got to make sure the leaves don't get in there. And you've got to make sure your pump works. And people who say to me, but people won't do that. Well, that's what they said when they invented the household boiler. Everyone manages their household boiler. No one knows how they work, but you get someone in to do it. It's become the norm. And what we've got to do is make sure that this becomes the norm. And running a rainwater harvesting tank is a lot simpler than running your gas boiler or your ground source heat pump or whatever it is. So it's kind of let's look at this glass half full rather than glass half empty. See our destination, say, right, how do we get there, rather than what are the problems? Let's solve the problems, be they cultural, be they economic, be they legislation, be they regulation, and get to a future that's far more sustainable than the one we're currently building at the moment, which is going to be so subject to a changing climate, when we will just be struggling. People will be collecting plastic bottles from the streets so they can take it back in the pouring rain and flush their toilets with this drinking water, as we saw in the southeast this Christmas time. Absolutely bananas. Why are we doing that? Because we're not managing rain well where it lands. I'm very hopeful for a positive direction of travel for this message, but I need help from everyone here to spread the word.
Thanks, Matt. And so now we've got Dr. Sarah Bunney, who's CEO and founder of Our Rainwater, I believe, and I'll let her do a bit more of an introduction, but over to Sarah.
Thank you, Anthony. What I'll do is I'll share my slides first, just to make sure they're on the screen. Can you see those, Anthony?
Yeah, sorry.
Wonderful. Right. Okay, so hello. Yes, I will introduce myself in a moment, but first what I want you to do is and this follows on quite nicely from you, Matt. I was nodding so much, I think I've given myself neck ache now. But I want you to imagine a world where every raindrop is a precious resource, and I feel like you can do that now. And I shall show you some examples, because this is achievable. So here we go. So projects like these award-winning flood-free gardens show exactly what's possible when we start managing rainwater at force, or managing rainwater where it lands, as Matt was saying. And these examples really do show what you can do in your own gardens. They are very achievable. And our contribution at our Rainwater was to provide the smart technology so that we could help to optimize how these systems perform over time. And that simple idea of managing rainwater where it lands before it becomes a problem has kind of shaped everything that we do at our Rainwater. So let's get my mouse on the screen. So hello, so I'm Dr. Sarah Bunney and I'm CEO and co-founder of our Rainwater, and I have a career in flood risk management, but also in the academic sort of field as well, and I'm currently CEO and co-founder of our Rainwater. But what do we do? So we work together with water companies, local authorities and communities to rethink how rainwater is managed before it enters the network by building an operating system for distributed rainwater infrastructure. And today, what I want to do is share what we've learned from delivering projects on the ground, because over the last few years, I've been very convinced that scaling distributed rainwater infrastructure isn't simply about installing more assets, it's about building better systems. Now, at our Rainwater, we see every rooftop as an untapped stormwater asset. Every rooftop collects rainwater, but that rainwater is often treated as a problem the moment it enters the network. And the real opportunity, and Matt's told you all about this already, is to act earlier at the point where rain first hits the system. And by managing rainwater where it lands, we can help to reduce surface water flooding, sewer spills into our waterways, protect the environment, but also increase climate resilience and also lower long-term infrastructure costs. But how does this relate to what we do in our Rainwater? Well, we turn rainwater systems into intelligent managed infrastructure. So what we do is we combine 4 capabilities. We use optimization modeling to try and identify the right solution in the right location to meet the client's objectives, but also for the problem that we're trying to solve. We then help communities to understand and adopt those interventions at scale through our engagement programs. We continuously monitor how these systems perform under real rainfall conditions, so we can use that information to optimize performance over time, but also to deliver measurable outcomes at scale. And together, those capabilities help us to transform individual rainwater assets into intelligent managed infrastructure. Now, we work predominantly at the moment in the space of domestic rainwater attenuation tanks. So that's kind of going to be the focus of the presentation and the insights, I suppose, that I'm sharing with you today. So I just wanted to sort of set the scene so you'll understand where I'm coming from when I start talking to you about some of the insights that I want to share with you today. Now, installing more assets isn't the same as scaling infrastructure. So the UK is investing very heavily at the moment in distributed rainwater infrastructure, which is great. We already have an excellent toolkit of interventions, rain gardens, swales, permeable pavement, rainwater management systems, and we have the SUDS manual, as Matt mentioned as well. But installing more assets isn't the same as scaling infrastructure. We have climate change, we have population growth, we have aging infrastructure, and that increasing pressure on water resources. And this all demands a connected approach. So the question isn't simply how do we install more? The question is how do we build measurable systems that continue to improve over time and help to answer some of the questions that Matt had on the slide at the end. And that question has shaped much of our thinking. And what I wanted to do today is share some of the insights or our discoveries, if you like, but at a very high level. So I'm not going to delve into the details of any of these. So our first discovery is every catchment is different, every location is different. When people talk about scaling, it's very easy to imagine doing more of the same. And this is certainly, in some instances, something that we see a lot of. So you have more rain gardens, more rainwater tanks on people's properties, more disconnected downpipes. And scaling then starts to become synonymous with quantity. But when you're delivering on the ground, you're kind of learning something different, that there is no universal intervention or one-size-fits-all approach, especially if you're looking across a catchment. And each catchment and each location has its own different set of objectives, different constraints, but you're also working together with different communities. And the right solution always depends on the context. Sometimes the priority might be reducing flood risk. Sometimes it might be reducing combined sewer overflows. Sometimes it's increasing resilience or maximising water reuse. And a lot of the time it's a combination of all of these and more, but also including that engagement and building trust between water companies and the communities they serve. And it seems obvious, really, that different objectives will lead to different solutions. And this is why we work very, very closely with our clients to help define those objectives from the start, because it's really important. Now, the right intervention depends on context. And the reason why I'm saying that is the same objective can require different interventions in different places. So, for instance, we've seen instances where a detached property with a large permeable garden might be an excellent candidate for infiltration. So you can disconnect the downpipe and perhaps feed the pond, or put the rainwater into the garden and feed the trees. We actually had an example of that last week in one of our deliveries. Whereas a Victorian terrace with a small concrete courtyard might only be suitable for attenuation. And from our experience of delivering solutions on the ground, scaling isn't about repeating the same interventions. It's about making better decisions about which intervention belongs where. And this is why we always start a lot of our projects, I should say, with optimization modeling. Now, modeling is the beginning of understanding. So we see modeling as something that helps us to identify where interventions will deliver the greatest impact. And it's an important first step in our operating model, not because it gives us all the answers, but because it helps us to ask better questions. You know, where is the greatest potential for an intervention? Where will interventions deliver the greatest impact? What combinations of solutions will achieve the client's needs? And in many instances where we're delivering residential schemes, what will work better for the householder and the community? And in this slide, what I'm talking about as well is that, you know, we should be thinking more integrated across catchments about how the different solutions operate together. So you can have rain gardens in one area, swales in another, perhaps householder attenuation tanks. There's so many different interventions, but making sure they're all integrated and connected is something that we're not very good at. So modelling isn't the end of the process. For us, it really is the beginning of understanding. Now, not every property can participate when you're talking about residential rainwater attenuation, and that's okay. We're quite accepting of this. And we also make a point of recording, you know, the people that can't participate, because in the context of installing rainwater attenuation tanks, some householders already have existing systems. And it's not that they're disengaged. It's that they don't want another rainwater tank because they have no spare downpipes to disconnect. They're already doing it. And they're very happy to share sometimes the 5 or 6 rainwater tanks that they have all connected together, which is wonderful. But we're obviously adding up how much rainwater they're potentially attenuating or storing. But some have physical constraints as well, so a lack of space. Some householders just don't want to take part, and that's okay, because success for us isn't always measured on achieving 100% participation. It's measured by achieving the best possible outcome across the catchment or location. So sometimes you can pick up the householders that don't want to participate by attenuating rainfall from, you know, more roofs or disconnecting more downpipes. And it's very much a systems challenge, not an asset challenge. And this is coming back to what Matt was saying as well, is changing our way of thinking, because once you begin thinking in systems, you realise something else, that communities aren't separate from infrastructure, they are very much a part of it. And that brings me to our second discovery. Communities are part of the infrastructure system. So they don't just receive infrastructure, they influence how well it performs. And when we think about infrastructure performance, we naturally think about hydraulic design, storage volumes, asset performance. And these things are all important. They really are. But engagement and the way in which it is conducted is also very important. One thing that we found in the work that we've been doing is that a lot of communities do not respond very well to top-down communications, and they have been very happy to tell us this. Particularly given a lot of the media attention that's going on at the moment, there's a lot of distrust with water companies, and we're trying to sort of get that message across that we're all part of the problem. How can we all be part of the solution? Because our climate is changing and that's affecting all of us. So it's far more important that we found when we first start engaging with communities to listen, to learn, and to collaborate. Now, we've always understood the value and importance of engagement, which is why it's been built into the business model right from the start. And delivery has really reinforced that. And I also want to stress as well that marketing, building effective comms, it's a science and an art in itself. And for that reason, I don't have just a technical team. I have an expert team that are experienced in marketing and communication so that we can get those messages very clearly across to the communities that we serve. And that again reinforces there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to all of these things, particularly when you're delivering engagement, because each community is different. Some are more engaged than others, and the way in which people engage is also very interesting. And one example we had of this is that in one project, we noticed that participation was growing really, really slowly and steadily over time. And we had to keep putting the messages out there, giving people more information. And when we explored why this was occurring, we realized that prior to signing up for anything, the community really wanted further information. They wanted to understand why is the water company giving us a free rainwater tank? Why does this project matter? What's the problem that they're trying to solve? And particularly if you're somebody who hasn't experienced flooding, you want to understand, what's going on. But they also wanted to understand how they were part of the problem, but more importantly, how they could be part of the solution. And then in another project, we experienced the total opposite. So we had rapid sign up, short period of time, and which is increasingly what many of our clients ask for. We want it quick. We want everybody signed up. But this was quite important because what we found in this instance was while registrations arrived almost immediately, the depth of understanding was very shallow in comparison to the slow participation. And what we found were the motivations for signing up. It wasn't because they were interested in the problem or trying to save their rainwater or capture the rainwater. They were only interested in the opportunity to receive a free rainwater tank. So that for us was very important because then we're thinking, okay, in long-term performance, that's probably not great. So we need to do a lot more work here. And I suppose at first glance as well, that second project looked a lot more successful when reality it wasn't. And this is what I mean about there's definitely a science to all of this. If people don't understand why infrastructure has been installed, they're far less likely to value it or manage or maintain it over time. And what we want are systems that are performing throughout the lifetime of the asset. So you need people to be engaged with their system because over time that will influence how well the infrastructure performs. And that's why engagement isn't separate from engineering. It's really much a part of it. Every community has different motivations, different experiences, different levels of trust. So it really has to be designed with the same care that we put into building the infrastructure itself. And that has been a really, really big insight that we wanted to share with the sector because communities aren't simply the beneficiary of infrastructure, they're part of it. And because infrastructure performs where engineering, environment and people come together, and then once you start to understand that, projects stop being about isolated interventions, they become opportunities to learn. And that brings me to our third discovery. Now, monitoring, that transforms infrastructure or helps to transform infrastructure into a learning system. And our third discovery has influenced how we think about distributed rainwater infrastructure. Right from the start, we saw the value of monitoring interventions so that we could understand how do they perform under real rainfall conditions, so that then we can use this information for future decision making, but also to optimize further and improve project outcomes over time in the project we're working on, but also future projects. So we take a lot of the insights from our projects and we try and share those insights as much as we can, because monitoring doesn't just validate performance, it helps us to understand how the whole system behaves. We've learned that products don't always perform exactly as expected under real rainfall conditions. As we know, rainfall varies across catchments. We've learned that people interact with infrastructure in ways we hadn't anticipated. And every one of those observations helps us to improve our communication and the interventions and our engagement for the next project. One example that challenged our assumptions was water reuse. And on projects where water was primarily used for garden watering, reuse was much lower than we'd expected, even from gardeners, which doesn't make rainwater reuse any less valuable, but it just reminds us that understanding how people use these systems is just as important as designing how or understanding how we design them. And used in the right way and in combination with existing systems such as sewer level monitoring, the analytics and the data from the monitoring can also help to inform decision making. So suddenly monitoring isn't just helping us understand a rainwater tank, it's helping us to understand the system itself. And when you connect modelling with communities, with the monitoring, then it all stops becoming separate activities and together they become part of a learning system. Every catchment teaches us something, every community teaches us something, every rainwater event is teaching us something, and then every project makes the next one better. And for me and my team, I'm talking on behalf of the rainwater team, but that's what makes really exciting opportunities for our sector, because we're no longer simply installing distributed infrastructure, we're building a distributed infrastructure system that has the potential to learn. So I'm not talking about AI here in general. So building infrastructure that learns. So what have these projects taught us? Well, it's taught us that scaling distributed rainwater infrastructure isn't simply about installing more assets. It's about building better systems. Systems that recognise every catchment is different, systems that recognise every community is different, and systems that become more intelligent because every project teaches us something. For many years, we thought about rainwater management as a collection of individual interventions, so a rain garden, a swale, a tank, a permeable surface, but delivery changes your perspective, because then you stop seeing individual assets, and you start seeing that connected system, a system where modelling helps identify the right interventions, where communities influence long-term performance, and where monitoring generates evidence that improves future decisions, and where every project strengthens the next. And that for me is what scaling should look like, not simply distributing more assets, but building a system that continuously improves. And that's what managed infrastructure really means. Not infrastructure that's installed, but infrastructure that learns, or that we can learn from. And the opportunity now is to bring all of those things together into an operating model that is designed intelligently, delivered intentionally, monitored continuously, improved systematically, but informed by evidence. And that's very, very important. So for us, and we're totally with you, Matt, on this, the future of rainwater management starts at the source. But our rainwater, we are also building that operating system, one that helps utilities to identify the right interventions, to engage communities, understand real world performance, so we can continuously improve outcomes over time. Because the future isn't installing more assets, it's about building a system that learns. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We've had a question. Even if each system is small, the risk aggregates at catchment scale. So who ultimately owns the flood risk if these systems fail or collectively exceed capacity?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So with the rainwater tanks, in the way in which they're installed and the way in which they're designed, they shouldn't fail to cause any kind of flooding on a large scale, or collectively exceed capacity. But I suppose when you're thinking about, and this was an interesting conversation I had in a meeting last week, is, and this probably fits more with agriculture actually, if you're building ponds for agricultural purposes, there was one incident that I do remember when I worked at the Environment Agency, where a private landowner had a series of ponds connected to one another, and these were quite large scale ponds, and one of the banks on one of them was starting to collapse, and we had to think about, at the Environment Agency, how we would then either evacuate that location, because there were a large number of household properties further down, or how we would also warn those properties, because they weren't usually at risk of flooding, because we managed flooding from the rivers. And that posed a lot of interesting questions. That was over 20 years ago now. So in terms of rainwater tanks, on an individual property, I don't see that as an issue. But if you're talking about larger schemes, maybe series of connected ponds or something like that, then yeah, we would have to make sure we manage that very, very carefully, because yeah, I have experienced that when I worked at the Environment Agency many years ago.
And I think we've got time for probably one more question before we hand over to Andrew to do the notices. Martin's asked, do you understand why gardeners do not use as much harvested rainwater as you expect?
No, not yet. But we do have an Engage the Nation campaign that we're running so that we can start to understand these in more detail. I think we had a high expectation that the tanks would be permanently empty, and that the householder would be using enormous amounts of rainwater. But when we looked at the monitoring, they weren't using as much as we expected. So it's kind of related to our assumptions, I suppose, on that. But we're monitoring them at the moment because we can see when the householders are using that rainwater. So we're trying to understand why was our assumption so high? Because what happens is when we go into some communities, a lot of householders say, I don't want an attenuation tank that maybe the water companies require. What we want is a tank there where we can store the rainwater, but we also need to, from our perspective, need to attenuate that flow as well. So we put a tap in the tank at a certain level so the householder can have that rainwater to use for home use. But what we were seeing that even the people that had asked for that weren't using as much rainwater as we expected them to. So yeah, it's kind of managing that assumption. But yeah, we're continuously go back to the householders, and we do ask these questions. But we've got a big campaign out at the moment, Engage the Nation, which perhaps I should have put a QR code up, so we can start to understand these things in a lot more detail. Definitely.
Thank you. And we've had quite a lot of other questions, which we'll hopefully try and answer. Yeah, maybe we'll try and get around to answering those in writing in due course. So yeah, I think Andrew's just going to round things up with a few notices.
I certainly can, Anthony, but I'm sure people would like to speak to or hear Dr. Sarah rather than myself. But because of the time that we're on, we're going to go to the events now. Thank you very much for that. As you can see on the screen, we've got a number of events that are happening, certainly from a national basis. One recent face-to-face meeting at Holnicott Estate was very well attended, and thanks go out to Daniel Fitzgerald for organising that. You can see there's an event on the 30th of June, preparing for CIWEM chartership. We've got the 1st and 2nd of August, which is a study weekend, and you can see the rest of those without me reading them all. I'd like to highlight really the CIWEM Presidential Awards Dinner, and that is at a very nice venue at Drapers Hall. I attended last year, and I can wholeheartedly recommend that. But look out on the events page of CIWEM. You see the link there right at the very top, and I'm sure something will float your boat.
I suppose we should just thank the speakers today and thank everybody for coming along to the webinar, and hope everybody got something from today. And yes, special thank you to Matt and Sarah for putting in the time to prepare these presentations and to speak to us today. And yeah, excellent. Thank you.
I certainly agree with that, Anthony. Thank you very much. There's a lot of takeaway points that we've got to make things simpler and certainly to bring things home. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sarah, for doing that for us.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Really good. Thanks, Anthony, for arranging and organising. I think everybody got an awful lot from that.
Cheers. Right. Enjoy your afternoon.